Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Fuel the Conversation, a podcast for fuel people by fuel people. I am Freddie Riddler, and joined with me, as always, Mr. Kyle Sheehan. Now, it's fun to say Mr. Kyle Sheehan. Every time I said Mr. Sheehan before, I felt like, Brian Sheehan. But since he's kind of exiting, retiring in 2025, I hope you all come to our seminar in June in San Antonio to kick Brian. Well, I shouldn't say that. To professionally walk Brian out of the RCC realm.
Come on, it's all good.
It's all good. But yeah, so Mr. Sheehan, the co-owner of RCC, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm really excited for this discussion we have slotted today. And everyone's going to have to bear with us in all of our Minnesota accents that we're going to have on this call, this podcast. It's going to be a really fun one. I'm excited to delve into it.
Yeah, you're going to hear a lot of you betchas and thens, and it's going to be kind of interesting.
And we'll there too.
So joining us today is Dave Wager. Dave Wager is the executive director of the Minnesota Propane Association. Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here.
Yes, sir. So, Dave, before we get started, tell us a little about who you are and your involvement in the Minnesota Propane Association.
All right. Well, you stated the where I currently am, executive director of the Minnesota Propane Association. But my journey began back in 1987. So, making this my 37th year in the industry. I actually started as an HVAC technician at a local co-op in southern Minnesota in Northfield, where I currently live. And through the years, that co-op system, provided ample career growth and education opportunities and allowed me to progress through various management roles. I was also able to participate in management education through CHS. My association career outside of the co-op, that began in the late 1990s. At that time, the MPA had a building called the Hall of Flame at the Minnesota Fairgrounds. And, with my HVAC background and my propane background, I volunteered to help set up equipment and displays. And I also worked at that building during the fair. From there, the board at that time decided to sell that building, and we exited our involvement at the state fair. So I was asked to consider a board position, which was then MINPERC, Propane Education Resource Council. And I accepted that opportunity, and since then I've been active on both, now it's currently MINPEPSI, the Propane Education Promotion Safety Council, it's a lot of words, and our Minnesota Propane Association boards. I served in various capacities and leadership positions. I joined the association staff here in April of 2019 and became the executive director on January 1 of 2020. And in January 1, 2023, I also became the MINPEPSI executive director when Roger Leiter officially exited all his involvement here at the association. So that's where I started, and that's where I am today.
That's an awesome resume. What's been your favorite story, or I'm sure you have tons of connections and people. Do you have one that just kind of steps out as maybe either a mentor for a person or a fun story from all that time that's just kept you going in the industry?
Probably the biggest thing was meeting Roger Leiter and Jerry Kowalski. Two icons in our industry, and two people that just made a profound difference in my life. Just they're so welcoming and so down to earth, normal people, and I just admired them from the time I met them. And that just really made me want to be involved.
So, Dave, I wrote down something here. It's quite interesting. 37 years in the industry. I won't go on to that anymore because it starts to age people. So, to stop with that piece of it. But I did write down January 1st of 2020. Wow. So, you became the executive director of the Minnesota Propane Association on January 1st of 2020. And then things kind of just stopped in about 2 or 3 months later. That had to be kind of difficult. Coming in, excited about this new role. I mean, everything was still in person. And then, bam, just like that. I mean, what happened during that 2020 March when things in April and things kind of shut down? What was going through the association at that point and with your new role?
Well, it was a whirlwind. It was just like everybody else. It's just day to day. What do? We came to the office. We tried remote work. We tried working in person. Very small office. Just a few people. Yeah, it was difficult. We learned along with everybody else how to do things remotely. Fortunately, the board was very cooperative in that. And of course, since then, we've gone back to in-person meetings, but it was difficult. Thank goodness that I had Roger still to bounce ideas off of and to work things through with me as to how we're going to move forward. But it also presented some opportunities. Um, um, it allowed us to learn instead of to shun technology, to embrace technology. So I like to look at both sides of it.
So you said you're heavily involved, or were heavily involved in Min Perk and now Min Pepsi.
Correct.
So how did COVID really impact that learning structure? Did you feel like we were set and in a good place that we could move all that to virtual environments, or did you really have to concentrate heavily on getting that out of that on-site in-person training that we're all used to into a virtual environment?
Yeah, the training that was kind of a different animal as well. If that's where you're going with this, Kyle. At the time, the association was using e-services. Don Hood was doing our training. And fortunately for us at the time, their company was pretty well versed in virtual training because they cover a pretty wide swath of, I think, more the eastern part of the United States. So that actually worked out pretty well for us. Is that our partner at the time was prepared and ready to go with this.
Awesome. So it really sounds like we as the state were kind of already ready for it. And I heard that story multiple times throughout talking to other people and within the industry. We all felt like we were right on that cusp, and that event really pushed it to go, nope, we got to bring it into the 21st century.
Yeah, we were all seeing it, at least I was, at my age, I was seeing it in my children, learning with iPads and stuff on school. So the direction of technology and the future of learning, that path was kind of set. This just kind of forced our hand.
Speaking about safety, I just attended one of the Minnesota Propane Association summer retreat in Breezy Point, and it was exciting to see PERC has a new training platform called PEP, and also that Merle, and you could talk about his role at the Minnesota Propane Association. He's a certified trainer. How exciting is that to be able to promote safety in the state of Minnesota? Can you talk a little bit about the changes of the name and the structure of the new training? And then also we'll give a little plug to Merle as well, because I'm sure he does a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, Merrill, and he does a lot of the heavy lifting. Yeah, he's a certified trainer, and we're in the process of transitioning from CTEP training to PEP, the PERC education plan, and we're real excited about it. It's change. People like to resist change. It's usually not popular, but we are excited about. There's some great opportunities with PEP, with the new learning paths, less repetition. We can customize it more. Merrill is a certified instructor, so he can also offer continuing education unit credits. So there are just some really good advantages for this.
Great, great. So we're going to switch gears a little bit here, Dave. A few years ago, maybe a year ago, I lose track of time. I got an email from you and Steph Hennon and a few others saying that it was time to rebrand the Minnesota Propane Association logo. And that was exciting, not only to be part of that committee, but also to represent something for the state, because a logo kind of binds you to who you are. We talk about RCC's logo, and there's been changes in the past, but eventually went back to the original logo that we started with. Talk a little bit about rebranding the logo, then also coming up with the CARE message, the clean, affordable, reliable energy message.
All right. Well, you mentioned earlier that we had our summer retreat and we focused on our new committees that we rebuilt here in Minnesota. But that all actually began with the rebranding of the Propane Association. So in late 2022, the MPA board authorized the formation of a rebranding committee. to develop a new logo and tagline for the association. Steph Hennon jumped at the opportunity to lead this committee, and she did a fantastic job. So really what it came down to, the association's name was not in question, but our logo, it was outdated. So the goal was to create a modern, clean, simple, a timeless logo. Formed a great committee, people with a heavy marketing background, design and graphic background, and these members were asked to submit design ideas and taglines, which they all did, and they were all different. Everybody had just a little bit different spin on things. So throughout several meetings, all these great ideas were taken and merged into what we have today. So what we have today is not any one individual's design or idea. So, as you can see on my shirt, our logo is our name coming out of the shape of Minnesota. It includes the word propane in green as a symbol of how environmentally friendly we are. And then, you asked about our tagline. Our tagline is clean, affordable, reliable energy. And to me and to us, that really serves two purposes. One, it tells our story of propane, that we are clean, affordable, and reliable. But when we accent the first letter of each word, it shows that we really care about all these things. So really, that's how this all came to be.
I'll make sure I have Vivid when they produce this somewhere on the screen right now. We'll see that logo pop up just to add some visual, because like you said, the colors, a lot of work went into it. It was a remarkable many meetings, conversations about just the small details of the font, the colors, the letters. It was very exciting to be part of it.
And I really love that idea of the dual purpose, clean, affordable, reliable energy being care, coming from a family owned propane business where they really do, these companies care about their communities. They're involved in them every single day. They're going to be there at Thanksgiving if you run out. They really care about not only their business and the industry, but they care about all of the residents within their community, and they want to offer a service that does not have this black eye behind it of that's a fossil fuel, everyone has to get rid of that. We see a need, we see a market that we can fulfill and a resource that we can provide, and I love that message of care. I think it has so many dual purposes to it.
And adding on to that, that's a message that I use quite a bit when I'm down to legislature. Our members, they live, they work, they shop, they're in the communities all around the state, and they live in the communities that they serve. So they're part of the fabric of our state.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, awesome. Hey, so let's talk a little bit more about that, Dave. I mean, there's a lot of viewers that are going to watch this, whether they're in Minnesota or not. What's the message? And you don't have to. I know the propane story can be a very lengthy one because we all get excited about talking about propane. But if you were to have to give a 2 or 3 minute, why choose propane? Why use propane? What's the truth behind propane? What would you say to those viewers that are watching right now if you were could kind of summarize it all up a little bit?
You have to look at it in all of the above energy philosophy. People want affordability. We're hearing that in every aspect of our lives right now, whether it's eggs or milk or energy, what have you. People want reliability. When a storm goes through and you hear that there's 10,000 people out of power, 20,000 people out of power, that's a big deal. But you never hear when a storm goes through that there's 10,000 people, 5,000 people. You never hear that there's 10 people out of propane. It doesn't happen. Our energy stored on site. And then you have to think about the environment. If propane story is told and people stop and listen and look at the facts, it's a very environmentally friendly fuel. It has a site source ratio of 3 times more efficient than electricity. If it's accidentally released in the environment, it can't harm air, soil, or water. It's just a great product that is here, energy independence, produced here in the United States, and it's something that people need to have.
And we all know that, and we're fighting the fight as best we can. And you mentioned that when you go to the legislature in Minnesota, that you bring these to them as well. what are some of those things we're fighting? I just saw a Facebook post in the propane delivery and service group on a truck builder had posted a cab checklist, and it said on the last highlighted line that you cannot build this type of truck in California, Massachusetts, or one other state. So, what are we fighting in our state, or you specifically fighting within the state of Minnesota, to protect this clean energy that we all see the benefits and see this as a future source and something that's very valid to use out there? What are we fighting right now within our state for those that aren't aware in Minnesota?
Well, in Minnesota, like a lot of other states, not all of them, but a lot of them, traditional energy sources, they're under attack. And in Minnesota, the legislature's hand is tipping the scale, against us. One particular bill, it's abbreviated as ECO bill, but it's the Energy Conservation Optimization Act. This bill, in Minnesota promotes electrification, but it has exceptions in it for electrical emissions. Let's see, as an example, electricity is allowed to discount production, transmission, and distribution. Well, those are their emissions. So the legislature basically is making something that has emissions free on paper. We try and get wins. This last legislative session, we negotiated an amendment to that very bill. And the amendment that we negotiated would have required that all energy is measured on a full fuel cycle analysis so that everything is fair. We had the support of the author of the bill, and we had support of the chair of the Senate Energy Committee. But from there, it went to a conference committee, and there it failed. And unfortunately, they added additional damaging language at that time. So all the talk now is data mining. You hear that all the time. So now in Minnesota, emissions for data mining, they call it data mining, but it's a data center. Those emissions don't have to be counted anymore for the carbon-free electricity by 2040 plan. So what this really does is it frees up supposedly carbon-free electricity to replace other sources. So, the fact is, well, at least in my lifetime, and I don't know if anybody's lifetime, we're not going to have carbon-free electricity in Minnesota because there's so many guardrails and goalposts, and they just keep moving them to give electricity an advantage.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny too when you say these things, and I attend a few other state association meetings too, and they're always up against something, and it always feels like propane's treated unfairly. Like there's always these hidden lines, and all these messages are on paper, like you said. But what we can do is just keep telling the propane story and just keep increasing the excitement behind it, and even PERC releasing commercials now on national TV, and it's fun to watch the propane story grow, and it's fun to be part of that story. So yeah, it's exciting, Dave. I brought back something from the summer retreat, and I think I heard this correctly. I get so much information, but this is something fun I heard. Is it true that Minnesota has the biggest membership to our association? We have the most members to the Minnesota State or Minnesota Propane Association.
I can't confirm that. I hadn't heard that one before.
Shoot. All right. I thought I wrote that down. That made me excited because I thought maybe we had like a large membership or something about that. I can find the details about that, but it's always
fun. If any of the listeners are listening and they want to fact check Freddie and bring him into their association, feel free.
States that would make me nervous. California, just because there's 45 million people in California, and they're the largest propane state in the nation, and Michigan's number 2, so that one would make me nervous. But we're typically a solid number 3 in the country.
That's awesome. That's great.
As far as volume moved.
I love the winter shows. It's just conference rooms full of people at the Radisson Blue Mall of America. I love attending it. Out of all the trade shows and expos and associations I go to, that's always one of my favorite, just because the friends I've made along the way in this great state of Minnesota and the propane industry. Go ahead, Kyle.
We may be a little biased in that, just a little bit, that where we live in the state. And I've always loved going to the Minnesota show. I feel like the involvement from the attendees is really high. I feel like you have really good discussions, and it's not so one-sided of just a bunch of information. And I always walk away from state association shows, national shows, with an increase in knowledge, and I always take something away. The Minnesota show, just to me, is a little bit more fun, a little bit more engaging, I'd say, than some of the other ones that are out there. And no offense to any of the other ones either.
Well, and that's our goal. We want to make it inviting. I've made a lot of good friends in this industry, as a lot of people have, and that's one of the purposes, is to get together and just see old friends at least once a year.
I had one question. So you mentioned that you're lobbying and you're doing all of this work, and sometimes you sit on this side where you're not involved within the association necessarily. What advice would you give for maybe a company out there that's not involved in their state association, but we still need that voice. We still need them, to come up and step up and go, hey, I have a place here, and I don't want the regulations to get rid of my business, essentially. What advice would you give to somebody sitting in there either from our side, from a vendor in the industry that's providing a back office package, a remote sensor, a service to the end consumer, or a propane company itself? What would you say, hey, if you're going to do one thing today, do this? Is it lobby your local congressman or senator? What would your advice be to somebody that's sitting there and listening to this?
You have to get involved. The people that have the power to make the vote, they need to be educated. They're not experts on any one or everything, but they have the responsibility to vote. So if we don't take the responsibility to educate them, our competition is. They're always listening to somebody, and if they only hear one side of the story, then that's what they're going to use to base their decision on. If you want to protect your company, if you want to protect your business, if you want to protect your livelihood, they need to hear from their constituents. I can go to the Capitol along with our lobbyists, Nancy and Tony, and we have good connections, and we can get bills introduced, and we can have amendments that get brought to the floor with the friends and the connections we have. But that's not enough to get it across the finish line. Everybody there that has a vote needs to have a reason to vote for us. We've had votes go against us, and we've had comments come back to us, well, we didn't hear from the propane people. And at that point, that one's on us. So we're going around doing regional meetings right now, and then obviously there's an election coming up in 6 weeks, and I'm nonpartisan. And I tell people, whatever decision you use to decide what candidate you're going to vote for, that's what you need to do for your own personal well-being. But if it's not energy business related, that doesn't mean you still can't have that conversation with them as a secondary purpose to vet that candidate. I said, just get involved, let them know who you are, what you stand for, and find out if where they stand in your positions.
Get involved. I love that, Dave. So, Dave, if somebody's watching right now and they're a part of or they live in Minnesota or not, what's the best way to reach out to you or the Minnesota Propane Association or their state association? What's the best way they can reach out to get more involved in the state side of things?
Our website's pretty simple. It's just discoverpropanemn for Minnesota.com. We have contact link in there. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of us. Or through social media, something like that. But we really want people to feel welcome. Our committees, we're averaging 14 people per committee. They're nice sized committees. That's 5 different committees. So we're getting more and more people involved in our association. And that's what I think is helping to make our association stronger. We're getting a voice from a broad swath across the state.
So, Dave, fun question here. You said that many years ago you sold off the building for the state fair. Did you get to go to the state fair this year, the Great Minnesota Gathering?
We're back in the state fair. This was probably our 4th year at the state fair. We're in the home improvement building. We basically took what we could get. It's not a bad location. We get pretty good foot traffic. State fair is not easy to get into. But we are hoping at some point to get an outside booth. We want to be able to have a school bus on display. We want to be able to have a vehicle on display. We want to be able to have a propane lawnmower on display so that people can just stand back and look. And as we always hear, we had no idea. So that's where we can never stop educating.
Absolutely. So what was your favorite food at the fair this year? Did you try the Amish donuts and wait in that 3-hour line?
I walked in with my wallet in my pocket and it never came out.
Good for you. You are a better man than I am.
It was not easy, but when I walked out of our booth, it was the second largest attendance in the history of the state fair.
Wow.
And I couldn't move, and it got to the point where I have to get out of this place.
Yeah, I love it. The things you do to get the message out, stand in a crowd of hundreds of thousands of people just to talk about propane.
Yeah, and I can't take the credit for the state fair. You know, Merrill does a lot of work on that state fair, as Jenny does here in the office, and especially to our volunteers. We get a lot of volunteers from our membership. And again, that's what people appreciate. When they walk in and they ask a question, you know, one of our members standing there saying, I can answer that.
Yeah.
Or I can help you, or here's my business card. Call me when you're back at home. Things like that. That's what people really love.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast, Dave. I appreciate it. I appreciate everything the Minnesota Propane Association does for our company. And it's an amazing industry to be part of. And keep telling your story, keep getting people involved, and we'll keep pushing through.
Great. Thanks, guys. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining Kyle and Freddie's podcast, Fuel the Conversation.
A podcast for fuel people by fuel people. We really hope you enjoyed today's topics and you found them interesting, and we hope that you pulled some value out of our conversation today.
To hear more podcasts from Kyle, myself, and special guests, you can catch us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or the iTunes Store.
To find out more information on RCC, you can visit our website, www.rccbi.com. You can also find us on Facebook under Rural Computer Consultants, also under LinkedIn under Rural Computer Consultants, or go ahead and give us a follow on Twitter at RCCInc79.
If you'd like to contact us directly, email us at sales@rccbi.com.
This is Kyle signing off.
And this is Freddie.
Until next time.